Welcome to Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors, the podcast where we stop playing small, start calling things out, and actually do something about it. I'm your host, Erica Rooney, executive coach, speaker, and a little bit of a movement maker, and I'm on a mission to get more women into positions of power and keep them there. Because let's be honest, we've been told to lean in, but not too far, to speak up, but not too loudly, to be ambitious, but somehow still likable. And y'all, we're done doing that. This is the space where we break it all down. The sticky floors, the ceilings, and the gaps that are shaping who gets ahead, especially in this next era of AI and leadership. Some of it's mindset, some of it's burnout, and some of it is the system working exactly as it was designed. Either way, we're not staying stuck in it. Each episode is your nudge to move. One decision, one shift, one bold step forward. No overhauls, y'all. No waiting until you feel ready, just real momentum. So if you're ready to think bigger, move smarter, and build power on your own terms, you're in the right place. Let's smash the ceilings and close the gaps. Welcome to the podcast. Y'all are going to be so excited about the woman on today's show because for decades, women have been trying to perform inside systems that were never designed for them. And the cost shows up everywhere, in misdiagnosed symptoms, in burnout that gets labeled as a mindset problem, in leadership cultures that quietly work against the female nervous system. This isn't a motivation issue, but rather a design flaw. Now, y'all, we've got Kathryn Spears, who is a neurosomatic practitioner, applied neurology specialist, and an international speaker. She works at the intersection of neuroscience, women's leadership, and organizational performance, helping close the gender data gap and rebuild how women's capacity is actually supported. Because when you understand the female nervous system, y'all, everything changes. Decision-making sharpens, resilience stabilizes, and performance actually becomes sustainable, which I am here for that. Y'all, this isn't going to be a conversation about managing stress, but it's really going to be about rewiring the system. So y'all, without further ado, let's welcome Kathryn Spears. I cannot wait to get into this conversation. Kathryn, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing awesome, Erica. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited for this conversation today.
Me too. And y'all, before we clicked record, she is in Nova Scotia. And I was like, wow, this feels so exotic. Like, I feel like such an exotic conversation. I don't know why, but I am so pumped. And this whole concept of the female nervous system has me so excited. So before we dive in, give me a little background. What led you to this moment?
So many things, but mostly lived experience. So I started with an undergrad in psychology, and then I jumped right in to the fast-paced startup realm across tons of various industries from skincare to tech on both brand and agency side, and was absolutely a certified hustler. I burned myself to the ground time and time and time again until finally, after I had my 2 kids, COVID hit. I kind of just had this period of time where I was like, what am I actually doing and why? And then I was late diagnosed ADHD. So many dots were connecting. And I was like, I've always had this yearning to help, to support, to make change. And I'm like, this is it. We need to change the game for women in corporate, for women in leadership roles. And so now I really work at the intersection of state of the female nervous system and strategy, really blending my past life and my present life to create change at an organizational and cultural level in the masses.
This is incredible. And there's so many synergies between already just the story you've told me and what you do and mine as well. But how old are your kids?
So my oldest is 14. She just turned 14. And my youngest is about to be 10.
Oh, fun. So I've got about to be 11 and about to be 8-year-old. So you're a little bit ahead of me. You're into those tween years with the girl, which I'm not quite there. And I'm a little bit excited about that yet because I'm very nervous about that. But what I loved is that you said you got here from your lived experience. And I'll tell you a quick story. I did a few sessions with an intuitive channeler. And the one thing that she said to me was like, you can't rush this because in order to teach it, you have to live it. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it didn't make any sense, and I'm like, but I've lived so much already. And then, you go through it and then all of a sudden it clicks and it makes sense. So when you say lived experience, like what is one of those pivotal stories that really comes to your mind that set you on this path?
Looking back, there was a few. First is going back early from maternity leave and like sacrificing my sacred time with my second born to go back to work. Number one. Also, like rocking my kids to sleep and incessantly checking my emails because, the world was on fire, but like actually it wasn't, But I think the very most pivotal moment was when I was leading a team for a fast-paced tech agency, and they brought in, this is when like burnout started to become a really big buzzword. And a lot of members of the team were burning out or leaving and churn was high. And they brought in a mental health practitioner and they had us sit in silence on Zoom for 2 minutes. And that 2 minutes of silence on Zoom to me felt like an entire eternity. And in that moment, I was like, something is wrong. Like something has to change here because this is not okay, to have to slow down for 2 minutes and just be so uncomfortable that I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I was like, this is the moment.
As I hear that though, I'm also wondering, had you been diagnosed with the ADHD yet too?
No. So it's definitely twofold.
Yes, 100%. I was going to say, because I can see all of that. And I think a lot of women who are our age, who are high performers, the hustle and some of the gifts that come with ADHD really help you get there. Absolutely. But then you can't keep running on that hamster wheel. And all of a sudden you find yourself just like super stressed out. You're burned out. You don't know how to stop the hustle. And yes. So you just keep going until you hit the wall or run yourself into the ground.
Exactly.
So yes. When you say you really kind of like hit that burnout, talk to me about what that looked like for you, because what I have found is so many people's stories, they just all look so different. And I think there's power in sharing them because what it looks like for me isn't going to be the same for you. And so when other women hear it, they can start to recognize those signs in themselves. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say what the most fascinating part about it all is that when I was at work, I was on. I masked so well the burnout. I was still the hype girl. I was still performing. I was still crushing my deadlines. I was still leading a team. I was showing up to the board meetings. I was doing all the things. And then what would happen is at the end of the day, I would just be done. I had nothing left to give to my kids. I was highly anxious. They were anxious. My daughter's ADHD. My son is highly sensitive, high anxiety. And I just was like, I can't do this all. And I felt like a failure. And I felt like I was giving 60% everywhere. Yeah. I was short fused. I was disconnected. I was numbing and coping with food and Netflix and really just trying to like keep it between the ditches. But that was my baseline. And to me, that was like normal. And it's so normalized and glorified that I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what it's like for everyone else. So giddy up. Let's
But no one else is struggling, right? Because their Instagrams and their Facebooks all show them thriving.
Exactly. Yes. And then we talk about the radical candor and the vulnerability, and we read the Dare to Leads. And, this has been such a prominent thing in the leadership roles that I've held. Like we've read the books, we've made the promises, we've gone to the retreats, and we've all aligned. And then when you go back to the boardroom, nothing is changing. And this is where that intersection of the state and strategy really comes into play, because those are patterns. Like those are how we are patterned to respond in those situations. And that's why we keep defaulting, because it's such a well-worn subconscious path for us.
I love it. Let's talk about this intersection, and we're going to hit the first street, which is the state street. And you're talking about the physical state, our nervous system. So tell me about this. You really specialize in the female nervous system.
Yes.
Talk about why honing in on the fact that it's female is so important. And then just give me all the goods. What do we need to know?
Yeah. So first things first, the male nervous system and the female nervous system are operationally different and run off of different hormones. The male nervous system is each day. Each day it's like a button resets, and it runs on predominantly dopamine, right? Where the female nervous system is cyclical, as we know, through our 28-day cycle, and neurobiologically shifts and changes throughout that period, and also is predominantly regulated through oxytocin. And oxytocin is depleted by dopamine. So when we're hustling and we're getting those quick fix hits with dopamine, we're actually depleting our number one hormone for regulation. And it just goes counterintuitive to what we actually need to operate and perform as our highest self, you know? So what we end up doing as women is just basically working against ourselves 24/7, 365, and no wonder we're so exhausted. So those are the main differences. And it seems massive, but the shifts are subtle in how we can resource ourselves and support ourselves at a physiological level to get that oxytocin. And a lot of it comes from like play and creativity and things like that, which, you know, we are the first things to abandon when we're
I ain't got time for that. Okay, so just to make sure I have this straight, oxytocin is depleted by dopamine. Oxytocin is what we run on. But,
it's our primary nervous system regulator. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. But we are also constantly chasing these dopamine hits with food and booze and our Netflix shows and our TikTok algorithm. So talk to me then about how do we, because I've always heard like dopamine is the feel good thing. Like talk to me about
and dopamine isn't horrible.
Yeah. How do we make that transition? How do we make sure that we keep all this oxytocin that we need?
It's mainly through resourcing and like taking time for joy and pleasure. And one of the biggest things that I know to be true about high performers is we often have perfectionism, and our stick is always moving. It's always being raised, right? Like we hit this one big thing and we're like, yes, let's do the next thing. Yes, let's do the next thing. That is when it's detrimental, right? Because we aren't taking a moment to actually feel and experience the joy or the win or the being present in the sensations and the feelings. And that's really just part of the society we live in today as well. Like we're all in our heads, and I could be here and I could perform and say, I am feeling it. I am really enjoying it. Like I celebrated the win over coffee, and now I got to go do this thing, and now I got to do that thing. It's like we're almost performing it so well to ourselves that we don't even know it. But there's signs, there's signs.
So this is such a timely conversation because I was talking with my fantastic podcast producer this morning, and I put something on social media because I have been very absent from social media, which, as you know, as a business owner, like you feel like you have to be on there every day, all day. And March is my busiest month. Like I am on the go. It is Women's History Month. There's South by Southwest. It's also my kids' spring break. So there is never a moment to breathe. And I did this unknowingly, but like I stepped back because it's like, I don't have more to give. Like,
right.
I can't even think about what I got to plug in here to Instagram or whatever. And so I just didn't worry about it. But now that you're explaining the science to me and the celebrating the wins, like that's exactly what I was doing, because I was saying, I will have to recap all of this later. Like they may hear about my Women's History Month in April, May, and June. I don't know. but I just need the space to rest and expand. And so is that kind of what you're talking about?
It is. And yeah, it is. And it doesn't even have to be a big thing. Like it can literally just be smelling your coffee and being like, that smells really good. You know?
I have a beautiful face oil that I bought in Italy. And I love it because when I put it on my face, it's just, and that's kind of like what I relish in.
Yeah, it kind of transports you right to Italy.
Yes, girl, take me back. Oh my goodness. Okay, one thing you said to me before we hit record on this podcast, but you kind of alluded to it, is that a lot of the systems aren't designed with women in mind. And so what I want to hear from you is like, where does that show up outside of kind of the cycle and the daily? Does it show up in any other place in the body, in the nervous system that we need to know about? Is there more science that you think would help us understand?
I think really a big one is people pleasing. And I think about how women from a gender perspective are expected to perform, sit still, be quiet, don't be too big, don't take up too much space, but take up a little bit of space, just not too much. And those types of societal expectations are also reinforcing how this behaviorally shows up in stress responses in women, especially in leadership. You want the raise and I don't want to demand too much. I don't want to, we're constantly kind of like diminishing or shrinking ourselves to fit into the paradigm that just shouldn't exist anymore and does. So how do we keep doing it in a way that isn't hustling us into the ground, but rather meeting that edge with a resourced nervous system to keep supporting the evolution of those systems and dismantling those systems in corporate?
Yeah. I think a lot of our energy and a lot of the burnout comes from the mental juggle. Because as you said, it's like, and in the beginning, the intro of this podcast that is the same for everything, it's like we're told to lean in, but not too far, to speak up, but not too loudly, be ambitious, but not too ambitious, right? It's all about be seen, but not so seen that you make them uncomfortable. And we're constantly having to check ourselves. Am I, and you said something earlier, which I don't know if it's a Canadian thing, but I love it. Keep it between the ditches. I'm like walking the tightrope, girl. We ain't even keeping it between the ditches. We are walking the tightrope. And I think that mental juggle is just what sends us to burnout. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. It's the balance between, and Gabor Mate talks about authenticity and the need to connect to other humans, right? And so there's this innate human need to connect to other humans as a core human need, and authenticity. And those are so often on that tightrope, like on either end. Am I going to be self-expressed and authentic, or am I going to stay connected? Because there is this fear that if I am fully self-expressed, if I am standing in my power and leaning in and speaking my truth and showing up and honoring what I need, will I lose the connection? And the connection is so much more than connection in the day-to-day, right? It's like, will I lose my job? Will, I end up this, that, and the other thing. There's so many things at play, and we're not consciously thinking about this. Like, I'm not consciously like, if I make this statement, I'm going to lose this, that, and the other thing. It is happening subconsciously, and it is totally running the show. And this is where the nervous system comes into play as protective patterns to keep us connected, because that's a core human need to our herd socially, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you brought up Dr. Gabor Mate. He's one of my favorites. He's got those two good books. The one is called The Myth of Normal, and the other one is a book on ADHD, which is called Scattered Minds. Have you read both of those?
Yes, both of them. Yeah.
Both great reads. So a little shameless plug, y'all. If you're listening, I'll make sure that both of those links for the books are in the show notes, but they're fantastic reads. I love being able to pull the science in and understand the why behind all of these things. So I'd love to hear from you, Kathryn. For anyone who's listening, who maybe constantly feels overwhelmed, but they're high performing, what is one shift that they can make to start supporting their nervous system in a better way?
I would say just acknowledging. Like, number one shift is the acknowledgement and the uncoupling of it being a personality trait and something that's fixed. So many women have a growth mindset, but when it comes to ourselves and the things that show up, imposter syndrome, inner critic, perfectionism, those feel fixed and they're not. We can really adapt that growth mindset when we understand that they truly are just nervous system patterns. At one time in our life, they kept us safe. And, it's a mixtape playing in 2026 from like 1992 that just is no longer relevant. We need to upgrade to Spotify or whatever.
Right? If we can only hit that button like we do on our Apple phones of yep, let's go ahead and upgrade that thought tonight. I would, in my world, girl, we call them sticky floors. And those are all of the limiting beliefs and the toxic behaviors that keep you stuck. And I love that you say this first shift, the first step is actually just acknowledging it. And in my framework, I have this 4-step science-backed framework. We call it SNAP. And the S stands for stop and notice what's going on in your body. And that very closely aligns with acknowledging it, because so quickly we just move through that because, as you said, we are certified hustlers out here. We are going, we are ambitious, we got things to do. We're parents. We don't have time to stop and think about why I'm stressed, why I'm uncomfortable. But there's that book, The Body Keeps Score. Your body knows what's up. Your unconscious mind knows what's up before your brain does. And so when you can stop and notice what's going on, you create that pattern interrupt and you can acknowledge, as you said, whatever it is that is keeping you stuck. And so if they acknowledge it, what can they do next?
I would say for so many, mindset is the default. And for me, and I can speak to personal experience on this, is I tried all of the things, the meditation, the mindfulness, the mindset shifts, but still ended up in the same default patterns. And so understanding that this is a subconscious physiological state that is happening within your body, and being able to interrupt it where it begins is an incredible next way to evolve that practice. And so we can do this by working in one of those systems, and it sounds complex, and I promise it's not, but it's at the predictive level, working with our visual system, our respiratory system, our vestibular system, our proprioception, which all are fancy words, but they are incredible on the fly state shifters. So when we can start to actually create this state shift at a physiological level, it indicates to the brain oh, we aren't actually in a threatening situation. We change the state, and then everything else follows, which kind of goes back to the state informed strategy.
So is one of those exercises where they're name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things. I'm probably saying it wrong, but you know what I mean? It kind of takes you out of that space. Is that something?
Yes, that can be absolutely one of those things for sure.
To change the physical state. Tony Robbins does a lot of jump up and dance things to change your physical state. Is that another great method?
That's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. All right, girl, we're going to take a left turn onto the other street of this intersection, which is all about the strategy piece. And, I'm a chief people officer, so this piece I'm really intrigued about. But from an organizational perspective, what are companies getting wrong when it comes to supporting women's performance and well-being in the workplace?
Yeah, what organizations don't realize is when their employees, their leadership is in a stress response, which comes from, fast-paced honestly just living in 2026. Let's be real.
Yeah.
And 99.9% of people aren't going to be like, I'm in a stress response,
No.
What ends up happening is areas of the brain, the energy flow is totally different. So it's going to deplete energy much faster. It's going to send energy only to the places that we need for actual survival. Think if we're in the woods with a bear. And that will impact performance tenfold. Mm. And I'm not just talking, burnout. I'm actually talking about performance and execution. And, I can think about even a couple of weeks ago, I was consulting on an incredible project with an incredible wellness brand. And there was blind spots all over their pitch deck. And it's because we get into the survival and we don't even know it. And we're missing the critical parts that will skyrocket performance across the board.
Yeah. When I think back to my burnout story in corporate, I think about, it was almost like I was just trying to move faster because it felt like I could never keep up. And when you are constantly trying to sprint, you miss so many things and you can't be an intentional leader. Right. And that's what's really needed in 2026 is leading with intention, leading with authenticity. But when you're just trying to move at the speed of this dysregulated hustle per se, it's impossible to do that. So Kathryn, if leaders actually understood, and designed for the female nervous system, what do you think would look different, not just for women, but for the entire organization?
Everything.
I love it. She's like everything, literally everything.
Literally everything.
Oh my gosh.
Literally everything. Like their bottom line would skyrocket, but we are so stuck in, we have to hustle to perform.
To survive, really.
To survive. But it's missing all of the blind spots. And then that's not even considering like the physiological impact of each employee, but also the collective, right? So when you have a leader, a CEO, a CMO that is operating from that state, it's then mirrored across the entire organization. It's like a disease, or a virus, it spreads so rapidly. And nobody realizes that it spreads so rapidly, right? And even I read an interesting stat the other day about how 95% of leaders believe that they're self-aware, but the studies actually show that they are like 10 to 15% of them are actually self-aware. And I'm like, yes, right?
Girl, as a chief people officer, I will tell you that stat is spot on.
It is so bang on. And this is where that protective nervous system comes in, right? It's that ego, like I have to perform. If I don't show up, like I know everything and I do everything. When it's like, if we can actually just sit here and be like, I'm going to get support from someone, and expand into this next level. But so many people are capped at the level they're at because they're afraid that there's a perception that if they admit fault, then they're not achieving. And it's like, no, performing. All of us are going to continue to expand if we have the openness to be able to actually do that. And if we had that lens in this area, in this arena, I'm going to tell you, it would change the game. Like it would be huge.
I mean, and that's just for men and women, right? Like that goes for
everyone,
not just
everyone
women.
And anyone.
Yeah. I'd love to hear, do you have any daily rituals or practices that you do to invite more joy and play into your life that anyone who's listening could easily plug in?
Like dancing, shaking it out, music on blast. I mean, my very favorite is in my car, listening to my like 2000 rap hip hop,
girl. Yes.
Vibes. I'm telling you, like cranked with an iced coffee, and that is my happy place. That is my happy place.
All the TikToks that show the moms from our generation that are blasting their trap music and their 90s, 2000s rap, and then they're switching it over to like, the children's music when their kids get in the carpool. That's totally us. But I am also here for that. All right, Kathryn, last question, best question. I love the gift of hindsight. And so when you think back to the Kathryn who was the certified hustler, who was burnt out, but always climbing, always grinding, what piece of advice would you give her today?
I would say, this is a good one. Turn down the noise. There's so much noise of what everyone thinks everyone else should do. And understanding that we can speak the language of our own nervous system and actually break through at the level of our nervous system instead of just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks. The inner wisdom is within us, but the control and the need to have the answers is really distorting the clarity that's already within you. So just turn down the noise and like get in touch with yourself gently and trust yourself.
Oh my goodness. That's incredible. All right, Kathryn, where can people find you? I know this work is going to connect with so many. So what's the best place to get in touch?
beyondyourmindset.com is my website, and I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Whoop, whoop. And we'll link all of that in the show notes. But y'all, thank you so much for listening. Kathryn, thank you for joining. And if today's conversation lit a fire under you, here's your next move, y'all. Don't keep it to yourself. Make sure that you share this episode with a friend, drop a review, but let's keep the conversation going. I need you to remember that your potential is limitless, and the only thing standing in your way are those sticky floors. But you know what? You have the power to break through them. So go out there, take up some damn space, y'all, and let's shatter some ceilings together.
If this episode resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Send it to a woman you care about, a colleague, a friend, someone who's been on your mind while you were listening. These conversations are meant to be shared, and you never know what one small shift can unlock for someone else. And if you haven't already, make sure that you're following the podcast. Leave a rating and write a quick review. It helps more women find this space, and it keeps these conversations going. If you're ready to go deeper, come a little closer. Send me a DM. I'll invite you to sit in on a live Her Collective session as my personal guest. No pressure, no strings attached. But you get to experience it, feel the room, and see what happens when women start moving together. Until next time, y'all keep going, keep choosing differently, and let's smash the ceilings and close the gaps.